YouTube. I love how that works. I think it's absolutely amazing. I'm so baffled by technology sometimes. I'm not going to go on about, I'm just a bad person for working in technology for so long and not being able to understand it. Let me make sure that's set up correctly. Okay, we're on YouTube, that's all working. Hi to the people joining again. We'll give it one more minute and then we will get started. Oh, Isabel, you're here. Fantastic. You get to see part 2 from your part 1. Yeah. Okay, we are at that time again. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Lightning Talks part 2. We're really excited. We had a great session last week and we're excited to have another amazing session this week as well. We've got 10 fantastic speakers talking about, this is where I test myself with the topics again, learning in a pandemic, tech deep dives, and a tech journey as well, tech journeys. So we're really excited. Welcome to the Coding Black Females Lightning Talks again. For those of you who don't know about Coding Black Females, we are a community of Black women in tech, and we're a growing community. That's a fantastic community. It makes me smile on a daily basis. We have events almost every week at the moment, but generally we have events twice a month. And we're a community to raise awareness of the amazing things that we're doing in the community, and to make sure that we have more opportunities available to Black women in tech. So I'm really excited that we're able to do this tonight and have so many amazing people speaking again about fantastic subjects. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, I'm looking forward to all of your talks. And we can get started. Siobhan, Siobhan is hosting this evening, by the way, not me. I'm going to hand over to Siobhan, who is in the leadership team. She is a fantastic woman and she does loads of amazing talks, and she's going to talk for us one day too. She's going to. But yeah, Siobhan's amazing. I'm going to hand over to you now and you can introduce the first talk.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, it's great to have you here this evening. We're going to kick off with our technology deep dive first of all, and we actually have a recording of Amina's talk which Charlene will queue up for us, and that will be our first talk of the evening.
I'll get that ready now. Can you see that? Yes. Amazing. I'll press play. Let me know that it's all working.
Hello everyone, my name is Amina. I work at The Guardian as an associate software engineer on the Digital Fellowship Programme. Today we're going to be looking at classes and objects in Scala. So let's get started. Let's imagine that we're tired of lockdown and we want to plan our next holiday. So we're going to use Scala to help us plan this fantastic getaway. As a starting point, let's think about where we want to go. Why don't we create a blueprint that describes the potential places we could go? How could Scala help us with that? Well, we could start by creating a class which acts as a template for creating objects. Let's call our class Destination. So we've got our class, but how can we create an object, an instance of that class from it? Well, in Scala, we can use the new keyword, and there we go, we have our first instance. We can make our class more useful by adding a parameter to it. Scala has a strong static type system, which means that we need to state the type of our parameter. Let's make our first parameter a string, and it's going to be called country. So, given our new class, let's create an object. Again, we're going to use the new keyword, and we'll pass in a string in order to follow the contract of the destination class. And we're going to make this destination Nigeria. Let's add another parameter to make our class more useful. We're going to add a second parameter of type int, which is a number. We'll use this parameter to store the price of the flight. This is great because now we have another field on our class, so we can hold more useful information. But the compiler is giving us an error when we instantiate our class with parameters in the wrong order. You can see that country is the first parameter and the second is flight price. So to remedy this, we can introduce named parameters when we instantiate our object. This means that we can change the ordering of the parameters and the Scala compiler can identify them. This is great because it means that when we create a new instance, the order of our arguments don't matter as long as we name them. We've now got two parameters on the class, country and flight price, but we can make them more useful by defining them as variables. In this case, we've used the val keyword to create an immutable field. If we define our parameters in this way, it means that we can call them on objects to return their value, which is really convenient. So after creating a new instance called Nairobi, we can call country on it and we'll receive the value Kenya. We can also make use of default parameters. Default parameters set a default value for a field without it being set when the object is instantiated. In this example, we've created a new parameter called with loved ones that returns a Boolean, true or false. This means that if we have any friends or family in a particular destination, our object will record this. We've set this parameter to false, which means that without declaring it true for an object, it will always be false. Here, we create a new instance called Nairobi, and we comply with the contract of the class by giving this object a country and flight price. However, when we call with loved ones on the Nairobi object, we get the default value of false. This is useful because it means we only declare this parameter if true, and it saves us a few letters of code. If we get tired of typing the new keyword when instantiating our destination class, we can create something called a companion object. The companion object has to be the same name as our class. So here it's called destination. And in the companion object, we can define an apply method. This means that when creating a new instance, we no longer need to use the repetitive new keyword. Here, we create a new variable called Dakar, and we set this to a new instance of destination with the country argument set to Senegal, and we haven't had to use the new keyword. Companion objects have lots of helpful uses. Another of them is that both the companion object and class can access each other's private fields and methods. Here, we create a private method within our class called family flight cost. This method calculates the total cost of our flights for a family of 3. We've defined this private method in our class, which means that typically only the class would have access to it, but because we've created a companion object, this also has access to it. If we create a new instance of our class inside the object, we can now call the method family flight cost. Now let's take a look at case classes. Case classes are like regular classes, but with a few key advantages that are going to make our holiday planning easier. First, when we create a case class with parameters, in this case, the parameter being country of type string, this parameter is automatically created as an immutable field. The good thing about this is that it has an accessor method built in, so we can call it on our new instances. You can see here that we call country on the Abidjan instance, and we get the value of this field, Côte d'Ivoire, as a result. This is helpful because it means that we don't have to use the val keyword like we did with normal classes. Second, case classes come with an apply method already created in their companion objects. So that means that we can instantiate a case class without using the new keyword. When we used a class for our destination, we had to write a few lines of code to create an apply method in our companion object, but we can get this for free with case classes. A final interesting point about case classes is that instances of case classes are compared by their field values and not by their names. This means that if we create two different instances of a case class with the same field values but different names, they are equal. In the code example here, we test this by creating two instances with different names, Abidjan and made up name. They both have the same fields because Côte d'Ivoire is the value of the field country for both of them. Nevertheless, they are both considered the same in Scala, despite them having different names, because the value of their fields are exactly the same. Another interesting thing we can do with Scala is to use traits. A trait is where we can design an interface without having to implement its behavior. In this case, we've created a trait called cost. This holds a method which does not have an implementation. We can use this trait on any class that we like. We just need to make sure that within that class, we provide an implementation. Here, we've created three classes: flight, accommodation, and packing list. All of them extend the cost trait, and they do this by using the extends keyword. So, how does each of them implement the cost method, which is undefined in the trait? Well, the two case classes do this by creating a parameter called cost, which is of type int. Remember that with case classes, the parameters are public vals with accessor methods by default. So, by creating cost parameters in our case classes, we've already provided an implementation to this method. The class packing list implements the cost method in the class body. Traits are really helpful because it means that all of these different classes can benefit from the same method. This becomes particularly helpful when we want to modularize our code because we can extend more than one trait on a class. We can therefore design different functionalities and plug them into our classes as we like. In this example, we test this by creating a list called holiday made up of our three different classes, and we're able to use the cost trait to sum all the different costs across these classes, giving us the value 1225. So in this lightning talk, we've spoken about creating a class, creating an instance of a class. We've looked at named and default parameters, companion objects, case classes, and traits. I hope you've enjoyed this, and do look out for more Scala videos to come, which I hope to put on my YouTube channel. So do follow me on Twitter to find out more about those. Thank you.
That was great. I really enjoyed learning a bit more about Scala, which is a language I've personally never used, and I got a lot out of seeing a little bit of what the syntax is and how it's used. And I don't know about anyone else, but I have been thinking about traveling a lot and hoping for when it's safe to do so. So I really enjoyed the thinking about destinations and where I might travel to next. Cool. So we have another talk for our technology deep dive, which is by Danny, who's going to be talking about Auth0 and the Invalid token.
Perfect. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm Danny and I'm kind of music obsessed and security obsessed. So this talk is going to be all about authentication in a music app. So title's slightly different, not before time. And this is a story of my experience of Auth0 and the Invalid token. So when I got into tech and started developing stuff, the first thing I ever built was a music sequencer. And it was just a single page app and it could be used by anyone to create, record, and download sounds. And once I had that all up and running and together, I started to think about the scalability of things. So I was thinking, what if a user wanted to be able to store and share their sounds within an app? Well, they would need an account and I would need to build a backend, preferably a RESTful API, but that's another story. And it would need to be secure because it would be holding personal information because they have an account. So what that meant is I need to put aside the music building stuff for a bit and try and figure out how I would introduce an authentication protocol. And we've all done it. Like we use our usernames and passwords to gain access to things all the time. So when someone logs in, they will put their credentials, username and password, and then that will go to some sort of authentication API, and it will be sent in the header of a HTTP request, and then they can get authenticated. But for my system, I thought, when you get authenticated, I want the client to be able to access any API within the application. So if I expanded it further, they should still be able to access all the things. And ideally, they should be able to do it without having to enter or log in every single time, or without one service passing their credentials to another service. And then I also wanted the client to be accessible from different devices. So someone could use it on a mobile app and a desktop and all of that stuff, and still have the same experience. And so the best, and more specifically, a JSON Web Token or a JWT, because they can be passed around without you actually have to pass in around the user credentials or username and password. So what is a JWT? Well, you're kind of looking at one right now. So I get that it looks like a mess, but it's actually comprised of 3 different parts. So you've got the first part, the header in red. You've got the second part, which is the payload, and that's in purple. And in there, you've got data known as claims. And in order for the JWT to be validated or something to consider it to be real, those claims have to be validated against. And then the last part is the blue bit, and that is the signature. And so the header and the signature are used to verify that the payload has not been compromised. So that looks pretty abstract right now. So time for an analogy. So if you think about your passport, right? If you look at the front of your passport says passport on it. And then if you turn a page, it also has like the languages you use or the language of the country that uses it. And that's the same as the header. So if you decode the header, you'll get the type, which is a JSON Web Token. And you also get the algorithm, which is used to encode and decode it. I'm not going to say what that is at the moment. Next bit is the payload. That's all the different type of claims. And again, if you look at your passport and you look at the photo page, you've got a picture of you, which any decent I don't know what they called, security person at the airport will compare to your actual face or biometric system. And you've got other things like your name, date of birth and stuff like that. And those all have to be verified, just like in this JWT. In our case, we have this ISS, which is who it's been issued by. And then you have like expiry and issued at and NBF. And that's all to do with timings of the token. But that's basically to say, these claims have to be validated or I'm not going to accept this token. And lastly, you've got a signature. And you all probably noticed that on your photo page, on your photo, you've got a hologram, and that's typically tied to whoever issued the passport. And so if you match them and they don't match, you can pretty much consider that as a fake passport. So at this stage, you're probably thinking that is a lot of work to get done to authenticate a system. And that's what I thought. So I figured rather than trying to venture into this area that was beyond my expertise, I would delegate it to something that could. And that would be an identity as a service platform. And you've got loads of them. You've got Okta, you've got Auth0, you've got AWS Cognito, Microsoft Azure, loads of them. So what that would mean in my new system is, you see we've got our user. The user could go to the client, my first web page. If they hit login there, they'd get redirected along path 1 to this host site in Auth0. And that's where they'd enter the username and password. And then Auth0 would check the database, which I've already kind of configured, to see if they were a legitimate user. And if they were a legitimate user, they would redirect them back to my site, but they would do it with a JWT in the response, because they would say that this person has been authorized. My app or my client would have to validate this. And as long as it did validate this, then that JWT could be sent in subsequent API requests inside my system to say this person is who they say they are, let them do that stuff. And the important part about this is that the JWT, JSON Web Token, it doesn't contain any sensitive data. It doesn't contain the username and password. You just need the username and password in order to get one. So once that's all set up, I would expect from the user view, they go to my site, they press login, they get redirected to Auth0. They ideally would enter the correct credentials. And if they do that, they should be authenticated, redirected back to my homepage, get any previous recordings or things like that they'd have, and it would all be fine. And for the sake of good testing, I'd want to do that not just with one person, but with a few people. And so I did. And the response was very, very mixed. So some people said it worked fine. Some people said it would hang a bit and then it would work fine. Some people said they had no luck whatsoever. So at this point, I'm kind of thinking, what was the point in delegating this responsibility if the successful outcomes are random? Then I had to think it's probably not Auth0, because they wouldn't be in business if they weren't in the business of doing their business. So I needed to go back to the docs. So going back to the docs, there were the basic things to check, like, is the token there? Is it validated? What exactly are the claims? And with a bit more probing and stuff like that, I figured out if I'm getting an invalid token or it's hanging, that's probably because the claims aren't being validated. But which claim could that be? So everyone expects an expiry date and everyone expects an issue date. The one that caught me out was the not before date. Every token has a not before date or time, and it states the time from which the token cannot be accepted, right? Yeah, that was a shock. Well, not a shock, but that was interesting. Because what that basically meant is that if for some reason my application server was out of sync with Auth0's server, they wouldn't have the same times. So you could get a case where Auth0 would issue a token, but the not before time would be in the future. So of course, my client side would never validate that, because you would never validate something that comes from the future. So there were loads of different ways of fixing that. One was to get into the whole world of time synchronization services and stuff like that. But for the processes of a music sequencer, that was pretty much overkill. So instead, you could also use Auth0 to add a window to the not before claim, which is basically an error margin, in which token could still be valid. Did that, and it was all good. So delegate always, but always read the docs. That's my story of Auth0 and the invalid token.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Danny. I really liked the use of the passport as a way to explain the JSON Web Token and how that's built up and how it works. And I'm definitely noticing a theme about travel in the technology deep dive section. And to our attendees, if anyone's kind of thinking about where they'd like to travel to next, I'd love to hear some of the places people are hoping to go. So feel free to put that into the chat if you want to. Okay, so we will move on to our next section, which is learning in a pandemic. We've got 4 great talks in this section. And first of all, we've got Olivia, who is going to be talking about head in the clouds whilst getting certified.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Olivia Campbell. My pronouns are she and her. I currently work at DXW Digital as a junior operations engineer. And as previously mentioned, I helped to co-organize this meetup group, Coding Black Females. So a few facts about me. I'm a career changer. So I used to work as an office assistant in higher education. And then I thought, you know what, let's change things up a bit. So I got into tech. I've been in technology for 3 years now. And also, I found out that I was dyslexic when I first started uni, then dropped out. So, quick show of hands. How many of us have a social media account? Don't we just love that? And keep your hands up. How many of you had lots of feeds about people being super productive in this pandemic, whether it's learning to code, learning a new language, just starting a new project, whatever it is? You're not alone. I was overwhelmed by this because it's like, I can just about make it to work, which is just 5 steps away from my bed. And to me, that was plenty to deal with right now. So why did I take this exam, this Amazon Web Services Certified Cloud Practitioner course? Well, the reason for this is because I learned not to do to-do lists in the pandemic, just focus on one task at hand. So for me, this certification meant that I could progress in my career. It's a quick win, especially for someone who hasn't done examinations in such a long time. And also to familiarize myself with the layouts of how the examination was laid out. So that's what I decided to do, because I just needed to block out the world around me and focus on myself. So everyone's got a different learning style. For me, I'm a visual learner, I'm a hands-on learner. And I decided to use my third-party resource called Linux Academy. And the reason why I use this resource is because they had bite-sized videos for each section. And I combined that with a Pandora app, which is a short timer on my desktop, so I can set the duration of how long I want to focus on studying. This helped me to get through. And what was really good about Linux was that at the end of each section, there was a quiz. So for me, that helped to reinforce what I'd learned and go back over what I didn't know. And once I'd finished that course, there was like an end of topic exam. It's meant to like simulate what I would experience when I go to the real exam. I found this quite useful because I failed this like 3 times before I even took the real exam. So when it came to the exam day, I don't know about you, but I live in a house share. And when you live in a house share with 6 other people, everyone's got different schedules. So having to understand that this is not a normal environment we're in, and you have to go past all the obstacles that you may face to achieve this. So when it came to me sitting the exam, I went through an AWS third party to do so. So as I mentioned previously, I am dyslexic and I required extra time to do this examination. So if I didn't need this extra time, I could have logged on, booked a course, select the time and date, hey presto, ready for exam day. However, because I needed this extra time, I had to upload evidence, wait for that to be approved, then email them to say that I would like to book this exam, for them to email me back to ask me for all the personal details and all the credentials that I've already provided to the system again, for them to then forward that to another department who then calls my phone. I wasn't expecting a phone call. And if you're someone with a learning difficulty or an impairment, you want to know about the whole process before you get into it. So you can imagine I was missing phone calls and I was getting emails saying, oh, we tried calling you, but you didn't pick up. And I was like, I wasn't expecting you to call me. So this went on for about a couple of weeks, back and forth. I kept missing their calls. I tried to call them back. The office be shut, whatever. Eventually, I managed to book this exam, but then I had to reschedule it. And again, if I didn't need the extra time, it would have been easy to log on to the system, reschedule the date, fine. However, I had to go back again, sending email, missing phone calls, and eventually getting in a new exam date. We're not quite there yet. So when we came to exam day, everything was fine. There was so much things you got to remember to do before taking the exam. I, on the other hand, forgot to disable my firewall. At that moment of time, I could have forfeited my exam. Lucky enough, they let me proceed. So when I was 9 questions into the exam, I lost connection. It timed out. There was no information about what to do when you disconnect from their server or anything. And I didn't know how much time had passed because you're not allowed any watches or phones in the exam. So being technical minded, I said to myself, well, hang on a minute. What happens if I restart my MacBook and enter the access code again and try again? Thankfully, they let me back into exam. So I continued. So I got to a point where I need to review the questions I hadn't answered previously. And then another technical issue occurred. This time, I don't know what had happened, but someone at their end had to talk me through how to get back to the exam screen. So these interruptions is now building up my anxiety even more. So finally, I get to the exact end of the exam and I found I've passed there and then. That was great. However, usually when someone's passed and happy, you would celebrate straight afterwards, right? And not me. I found this whole process draining and all the things I had to overcome just to get to the end of that exam. I went back to bed afterwards because I was just absolutely exhausted. So if there's something that I would like you to take away from tonight, is just focus on one task at a time. Doesn't matter how big or small it is, just focus on that one thing. And it's okay if you get up the next day and you don't get it done. Tomorrow's another day. So thank you for listening to me. You can catch me on my social media link. I tend to be more on Twitter, so OE Campbell. And I hope to do some more talks in the future. Take care.
That's really great. Thanks, Olivia. And definitely kudos to you for sticking with it and getting through the exam. and great advice as well about focusing on one thing. So I think we kind of overwhelm ourselves with trying to do a lot, and actually, the expanse of what we do has kind of shrunk quite a lot. So getting comfortable with doing what's within our capacity is a good piece of advice. So yeah, really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Shaquilla, who will be talking about detoxing from dopamine.
Hello, can you guys hear and see me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. Well, I'll get started. I'm Shaquilla Johnson, and I am currently a software tester, but I have been in this tech space since graduating 4 years ago, and I have had various different experiences. Testing is where I'm at right now. And my story is all about dopamine detoxing, and it begins at the beginning of this lockdown. I think it was end of March when Boris told us all of us to stay at our homes. And I told myself, well, this will be done in 6 weeks. We're good. I'm going to learn something in this time. I'm going to build on my JavaScript skills and go for my second certification for AWS. I've got my first CCP one. I wanted to go for number 2. And I was doing really well. I was really energized in enjoying this time at home. And then April comes along and we realize how serious coronavirus actually is. And we realize we're going to be at home, and realize we're going to be entering a recession after this, and Brexit's still going on. And I started to feel really down about where we were right now as people. So I started to supplement my day with more social media than I usually would. I'd check my phone and study. I've got work. I'm still working. So I'm working, check my phone every 25 minutes, check some more, and try to keep my mood up with the memes, with the memes and all the things that are going on the internet. And then by May time, I was on my phone more than I've ever been. My learning goals fell by the wayside, and I was infinitely scrolling on Twitter and Instagram. And then in May, we all witnessed the death of George Floyd, and I was still scrolling. I was still doing my regulars with the Twitter and the Instagram, but my feed wasn't filled with memes, as it were. They were filled with this man dying on my screen. It was filled with stories of pain and suffering. And this was the case for several days. I still hadn't stopped scrolling. It became my life seeing this, and it absolutely demoralized me. It broke me down. And there was one day in particular where it felt as though my brain had exploded. It got in so big, then exploded right inside of my head and left me completely deflated. There was no energy left. It felt as though my brain was steaming. I was overstimulated, taking in too much. It's almost as if I had to open up the hatch to let it get some air. That night was a tricky one. I've never felt that before. And I had a big cry. I went to bed really early that night. It was 7 p.m. I fell asleep. I never slept that early this lockdown. And I had a 12-hour sleep. It was necessary. But that very next day, I had to do something about that. I never wanted to get to that point again. So I Googled how to get my focus, how to find your motivation in lockdown. And it turns out I wasn't the only one that was in the same situation. Motivation had been lower than any other time than I've experienced. And that wasn't just me. Across the board, people weren't focusing as much. They're probably doing the same thing, trying to find joy and some kind of happiness, to feel something via their mobile phones, via YouTube, via Netflix. And this is where I fell upon the concept of the dopamine detox. Apparently it's all the rage in Silicon Valley, and I'm glad to have been a part of the trend. So I will begin with what deep dopamine actually is. I'll preface this by saying my background is in biology, and it seems as though scientists don't even know what it is completely yet themselves. But what it is, from what I understand, is it's a really powerful chemical within our bodies that motivates you to seek things, actions that help you fulfill a goal. So for example, when you're hungry, you seek food, or when you're thirsty, you seek water. If you're an addict, you do actions to allow you to get your next high. And in our modern day, dopamine, to get dopamine also means to check your phone for notifications, texts, to see if your tweets are doing numbers. You want to see if you're getting likes and shares, and those things. And those are the newer things in our lives that are creating that dopamine buzz that we'd get from eating and sleeping and drinking. And it's a really new thing for us. So we kind of don't know how to manage this new way of dopamine hitting our bodies. But the best thing about this is that while it is short term, while it's fleeting, once you've done it, once you're primed to do it again, those receptors, what triggers the receptors are very flexible and can adjust. And that is the premise of the dopamine detox. It's all about readjusting what you're motivated to do. And for me, it was to try and come away from the social media aspect of it and find that joy in discovering and learning like I had done once before. So it begins with you kind of removing all sorts of distractions. So I chose a Saturday and I removed my phone, my laptop, my tablet, music. I didn't cook that day. I removed anything that I would have used as a poor excuse to not do something. I've been in scenarios before when I've had work to do and I'd be like, oh, let me go cook something. And I spent 30 minutes cooking and I haven't done anything that I should have done. So I removed cooking for that day too. All I allowed myself to do was to talk to my immediate family because I can't escape them. I was able to write. If I had listened to music, it'd only be white noise. I completely removed, I made it as bland a day as, if that day was a color, it was beige, it was bland, really bland. And it was the idea is that when you remove those kind of distractions, it helps you kind of recalibrate and readjust what you find that dopamine in doing. So it was a Saturday, let's say for those 24 hours, 8 of those I'm sleeping. So you have a 16-hour day. And boy, the first half of that day was difficult, really difficult, because I was bored. I found that I had the phantom ringing syndrome where you think you're hearing your phone ringing, but it's not really ringing. I reached for my phone several times only to find that it was off, which only just told me how horribly attached I got to that piece of plastic or metal or whatever it's made of. And that was really shocking for me to realize how much I had relied on my devices to give me that dopamine hit. And it was a shock. Nevertheless, I continued. No YouTube, no Netflix, no TV, no radio. So I got up, I went to the kitchen and came back, found myself standing up, finding things to do, trying to keep myself occupied. I went to the window to see who was outside and came back to my room and I said, you know what, you've got to find something to do here. Tried to go back to sleep, I couldn't. You know, you try to not have to think about it. You want to try and do something with that time. And eventually I gave up trying. I just sat with myself and started to think. I was alone with my thoughts, really, for the very first time since this lockdown, where I'd been going at full speed ahead, trying to do my learning, trying to pick up all the skills I wanted to learn, still working, still consuming. I hadn't really been alone with my thoughts. And it allowed me to recalibrate. It allowed me to rethink my goals for the year, because we all know H1 was a bit of a mess. I mean, we didn't really have a H1, but it allowed me to readjust my goals for the foreseeable future. It also allowed me to realize if doing my AWS certification, number 2, was the best idea for me. It made me think about my job and my career and what was next. And then I picked up a pen and a book and started writing for the first time in this lockdown as well. I started journaling. And I started to feel that joy when I had a thought that I wanted to put on paper. I was like, okay, let me get through this thought now so I can get to my next thought. That kind of same behaviors of wanting to see something else come onto the paper. And it felt so good. It was truly the best self-care day I've had in a very, very long time. And I can't recommend it enough. So I finished that day, I went to sleep. And the next morning, I didn't really want to touch my phone. I kind of really enjoyed being without all those devices and being without the screens. And that just told me that, heck, this is probably really good for you. It's something that you should really try and encourage to do as much as you can. We understand we can't always be disconnected because we are people, we have to work. But this is something that I really wanted to start doing more of, disconnecting from my devices and using them with intention, not to just scroll, not to just consume. So I guess I want to round off with what I learned from this experience is that the dopamine detox is a really fancy way of saying switching off. I think we all need to do it as techies. I think we're expected to be around, always be available, to be online. And that's not realistic. Our parents weren't doing this. And I don't think it's a sustainable thing that we can do going forward. So make sure that you do switch off. And I mean switch off, turn off your phone, turn off your laptop. Go outside, have a walk, and don't even think about technology. We live and we breathe it as our profession. It shouldn't really become our lives. There should be a healthy distance between our tech and who we are. Number 2, I learned the importance of recalibrating. readjusting and replanning. This was a more philosophical thing that I've learned, having fallen off my learning goals initially and then coming back onto my learning goals, having done this detox. It's important to be able to understand where we are and how we're going to go forward. And if you've fallen off, get back on the horse with a new plan, with a new strategy. And the detox was my new strategy. I fell off my horse and now I'm back on it. I'm learning every day and I'm loving it, just like I used to back at school. And the third one, which I think is the funniest, this is actually not supported by science. There's no scientific basis for this at all. I just thought that it was a really cool thing that I should try out. But because it's not based in science, doesn't mean that it didn't have an effect on me and it won't have an effect on you. So that was my talk about dopamine detoxing and my experience with it. If you want to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn especially, I'm going to share this talk and my sources surrounding it. So if you want to learn a bit more about this concept and maybe try it for yourself, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Charlene, for the opportunity to talk. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everybody, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye.
Thanks, Shaquilla. That was a great talk and a great reminder to kind of take a pause. I've definitely noticed how much more screen time I've been having over the past few months. And yeah, I appreciated that reminder to kind of take a step back and take a bit of a break and get back to doing the things that we can really enjoy without having to use technology to do them, like writing, drawing, etc. So great talk. Okay, so we have 2 more talks about learning in a pandemic. And next up, we have Temi, who will be talking about completing 100 days of code in quarantine.
Okay, first of all, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well during these times. I'm Temi, and I'll be talking to you about how taking part in the 100 Days of Code challenge during quarantine helped me prepare for my current role. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful if you've ever considered learning how to code, or if you've recently started the challenge and are looking for a way to structure your learning. Okay, so I'm Temi. I'm currently a graduate software developer at BT on their technology graduate scheme. And I actually started this current role last Monday, so it hasn't been too long yet. And outside of work, I'm a tech creative. So I create tech-related content such as blogs, informational posts that I share on Instagram, and more recently, I've started making YouTube videos. And I'm also an advocate for getting more Black women in tech into the tech industry. So you may be wondering what the 100 Days of Code challenge is, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So the rules of the challenge are that you code every day for 100 days, code every day for at least an hour a day, and you publicly commit to the challenge on social media. And this, the third step is optional, but it just helps you keep yourself accountable throughout, and it also means that you can connect to developer communities across various social media platforms if you wish to do so. And overall, these rules are just guidelines, and even if you don't code for 100 days straight, it doesn't really matter. It's really about turning coding into a habit. So my motivation for starting the challenge was to prepare for my current role as a graduate software developer. And after leaving uni last September, I joined the technology graduate scheme at BT. So on this scheme, I rotate across 3 different teams within the tech industry. And early this month, I finished up in the network design team, where I spent around 10 months learning about mobile networks and architecture. And I knew I'd be joining my current team quite early on and wanted to prepare. So I decided to jump into the challenge to make sure my coding skills were up to scratch before actually joining my team. And my team currently specialize in backend development. So they work a lot with APIs and also microservices. So in my learning, I did incorporate some of the technologies that they currently use, which are JavaScript, Node.js, and Express. Okay, so for those of you who may not know this, I'm very type A, which means I love planning and making lists. So before I jumped into this challenge, I came up with a rough plan. The first thing I did was decide on a method of learning, and I'm a visual learner, so I learn best when I can see the material being taught, and therefore I knew I needed to follow courses and tutorials. So I found a few that covered the topics I wanted to learn on YouTube and also Udemy. And the next thing I did was set aside some time every day to code. And for me, the best time was usually straight after work, as I knew that if I left my desk to do anything else, I wouldn't come back to it. And I think it's also important for me to add here that training is part of my current role at work. So I'm supposed to spend a certain amount of time every week learning. So when I wasn't busy with tasks assigned to me at work, I would code during hours. So it did make completing the challenge easier for me. And I also structured my learning. So before I started coding each day, I had a plan of what topics I wanted to cover. That way I had a goal to work towards. And this is also really useful as it can stop you feeling quite overwhelmed with all the content you have to cover. And I also took notes as I learned. And generally this is really important when learning anything, because by putting what you've learned into your own words, it helps you understand and retain the information better. And it also means you have a quick reference to information if and when you forget certain things. And the last thing I did was join and engage with supportive platforms. I actually discovered this challenge from Twitter. So I already found a network of developers on there that were willing to help me whenever I needed it. And generally, I find if you're ever stuck with anything related to code, and just tweet that and hashtag 100 days of code, then you're bound to get some help from someone. And this challenge is also the reason why I started sharing my tech journey and what I'm currently building on Instagram. It's something that I really encourage new developers and coders to do, because it can be very overwhelming when you're starting out learning to code. So it's just nice to know that there are kind of groups and communities of people out there willing to help if you need it. I also learned, so now I'll move on to what I learned. So prior to starting the challenge, I had a very basic understanding of Python and MATLAB, because I use these challenges throughout my undergraduate and postgraduate degrees at uni. And throughout the challenge, I gained technical knowledge in the following areas. So the first thing I decided to focus on were front-end languages. So I learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so just the basics of those. And I also learned some frameworks. So I learned Bootstrap, React Native, Express, and Semantic UI. And frameworks are basically just a set of pre-written code libraries that are designed to be used by developers. And it usually makes building applications a lot easier than building them from scratch. I also learned some backend principles. So where I focused heavily on Node.js, APIs and REST APIs and Express, as these are a lot of the technologies I use at work. I also learned MongoDB as well. And I've also learned how to create my own repositories and set up my own projects and deploy these projects to GitHub. So I've spoken quite a bit about all the things I've learned, and now I'm going to show you a few demos. Hopefully the animation is working. Okay. So at the beginning of lockdown, I took part in a Code First Girls remote hackathon in a team of 5, working as one of the lead React Native programmers. And as a team, we created a prototype app using only front-end technologies such as JavaScript, HTML, and CSS in React Native. And the prototype updates the designated emergency contacts with the development of a patient in quarantine. And we ended up placing top 3 out of the 17 teams that entered, winning the most innovative prize, which was quite cool. And here I created a natural hair care landing page using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS using a framework called Bootstrap. And whilst building this, I got familiar with how to create responsive websites and also navigation bars. I also built an RGB color guessing game, which is useful for practicing RGB colors. And this was also made using the same front-end technologies that I just mentioned. And I found the trickiest concept here was to add the randomization part of the code in order to try and get the colors to appear randomly. And this is the most recent project I've done. So I'm in the middle of deploying it to Heroku, but we'll continue to add features and improve the UI as I see fit. And this was by far one of the most complex things I've built so far, as I use mainly backend principles, and I use some front-end languages in order to style the web page. And I also used the Express framework. And this was basically, it's just a Yelp clone. So it was a website, it's a clone of the Yelp website where you can just review restaurants and kind of comment and add new posts if you want to do that. So as I have exactly 2 days left until I finish a challenge, I've been reflecting on what I've done so far and what my next steps will be. The first thing I'm going to do is take a well-deserved break. Doing this challenge was a great way for me to prepare for my current role and to just get more familiar with certain coding languages, but it was also draining. Having to learn in a pandemic isn't easy. And whilst I'm on my break, I will think about the projects I can work on next, as I do want to build on the skills I've learned so far. And after my break, I'm going to migrate all the projects I've done so far onto GitHub, so it's visible to anyone who may want to view it. And I am unsure of whether I'll do a round 2. Although committing to the challenge publicly meant I kept myself accountable, I'm not sure doing a round 2 so soon is upon the horizons, but I'll just have to see. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this helpful if you've ever considered learning how to code or if you've recently started the challenge. Like I said, I do share my coding journey across various platforms. So if you would like to see what I get up to, don't be a stranger and you can watch my journey. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Temi, and congratulations on seeing through 98 days of the 100 days challenge. So all the best for the next 2 days. And I'll be checking out your social media to see what you've been working on and follow your journey a bit more. Thanks. Cool. So we have Yasmin, who will be talking about learning during a pandemic. Yasmin?
Yep, just gonna share my screen.
Yeah, okay, great.
So can you all see that?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so today I'll be talking about learning in a pandemic, and in my case, during maternity leave while juggling a baby, a toddler, and a full-time software engineering bootcamp. So a little bit about myself. My name is Yasmin. I'm 27 years old. I'm a mum of 2. I used to be a scientist and I'm now a developer. Prior to tech, I worked in cancer genomics research labs during my postgrad and then moved on to a data role in cancer clinical trials. And then it was at the intersection of science, healthcare, and tech that I discovered my passion and decided to enroll onto a 16-week software engineering bootcamp, which I graduated May this year. I'm currently in the process of interviewing for software roles and hope to land my first full-time tech job soon. So I'll be focusing on techniques and strategies that I used to help me learn and study during the COVID-19 lockdown, and hopefully you can pick out some nuggets from this. So the first thing I had to do was adapt to change and adapt very quickly, and also focus on what I had control of. So at the start, I was incredibly demoralized about the pandemic, especially the fact that many plans, visits, and events had been disrupted and cancelled, and also the uncertainty and the doom and gloom of it all made it really hard to overcome. So after a week or so, I decided to pick myself up and focus on what I had control over instead. So before focusing on learning to code, I had to set myself a goal, but then forget about the goal and try and focus on the identity change that I wanted. And this is a principle mentioned in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And what he did was he mentioned an example where two smokers were given a cigarette, offered a cigarette. One responded with, "I don't smoke," whereas the other one responded with, "I'm not a smoker." So from this, he indicated that the person who identified as a non-smoker was more likely to accept the identity shift and also act in accordance to this. So for myself, I told myself that I am a software developer and I will act in accordance to it. So another thing that helped me was having a positive mental attitude. With this, I was able to view the lockdown as an opportunity to upskill, grow, seize every opportunity to challenge myself, work remotely, which I've always wanted to do, but just never had the chance to. Attend a lot more tech events and conferences, volunteer for fellowship schemes, teaching, mentoring programs, partake in hackathons, network, and also do my first ever tech talk, which I'm doing today. Another method which I used whilst I was learning was to try and approach challenges with excitement and enthusiasm rather than dread and defeat. And this was a huge mindset shift for myself, and it really ensured and enabled me to overcome obstacles which I wouldn't have otherwise. So for example, I used to be intimidated by coding challenges, for example. However, with enthusiasm, I began to enjoy the problem solving aspects and really get to grips with new concepts before and therefore learn more effectively. Something else I incorporated was trying to leave my comfort zone and seek comfort in discomfort. So I came across this schema, which describes something called a hero's journey. So whenever somebody wants to embark on a new journey, they start off at this stage, which is called the natural environment or the status quo. And then there's a call to action. So for example, you want to join the tech scene in the tech industry. And in order for you to do that, you need to learn to code, for example. So it's your calling whether you will accept or refuse this call to action. So if you were to accept this call of action, you would then enter a new realm, and you would cross a threshold. And in this new realm, you'd be faced with trials and challenges and failures. And if you carry on, then you will see yourself grow and gain new skills. And then shortly after, you'll find some successes. And then if you carry on this trajectory, you begin to discard your old self and evolve into a new person and accept a new role. And then as you follow this trajectory further, you then leave this realm and come back into the old realm. However, you now assume a new role and a new place within it. And then you come back to your status quo, except this time as a different person and with a new natural environment and a new status quo. So this really helped me focus, especially when I was feeling discomfort and feeling very challenged. I told myself that I was on this journey of transformation. And I'm sure you've all come across the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So I've had to also tell myself to adopt this a growth mindset and to see challenges as things that help me grow, and also view feedback as constructive and not take them personally. So things to do with my environment that I had to organize were studying from home. And as a mom of 2 children, I had to juggle homeschooling, studying, and everything else in between, and a lot of planning was involved. Organization, communication, and teamwork were major key. I ensured on a daily basis I communicated my schedule a day ahead to my husband so that we could share workload and childcare duties as and when convenient. I also leveraged apps for time management and productivity. I also try to dedicate space and time for study, and this enabled me to minimize distractions. I also started to wake up a bit more early, around 5 a.m. each morning, to make the most out of the time when the kids are asleep so that I could spend the rest of the day with them. This allowed me to create blocks of focused study sessions. So one thing that a lot of people often forget or don't mention is the importance of mentorship. Luckily, when I was on the bootcamp, I had a mentor, and he still mentors me currently. And I think mentorship is just fantastic, especially because you can learn through their journey, and you can learn from their mistakes, which helps fast track you by saving you from making those same mistakes. They also guide you and offer you support, and introduce you to their network and teach you, etc. And if you're struggling with finding mentorship, a good place to always look is the Twitter tech community, which I think is amazing. And you might come across someone who might offer you guidance or mentor you. So having implemented and put all of these things in place, as a human, there were days where I would wake up and realize I don't have any motivation to do anything. And if motivation was the thing that I was really relying on, then I wouldn't get anywhere. I wouldn't reach my targets. So I quickly discovered that motivation is actually a myth, and I've had to rely on self-discipline instead. So what is the difference between motivation and discipline? Motivation is waiting until you feel like doing something before actually doing it, whereas discipline is doing that action regardless of how you feel about it. So clearly self-discipline was the way forward for me. And something else that I've had to do on a daily basis was give myself positive affirmations, tell myself that each day is a new day and that I will do great. And as someone who believes in religion, prayer was also paramount. So with all of these things, what did I achieve? So I managed to complete the bootcamp and also create a full stack app and demo this to more than 100 industry experts. And I also learned a whole lot of tech stack and tools, and which has definitely helped me in trying to start my new role in, as a software engineer. So thank you for listening, and if you want to follow me, that's my socials. If you want to network, that is my LinkedIn.
Thank you, Yasmin. First off, I just wanted to say congrats on your first ever tech talk. You did amazing, and it was really great to hear about your journey and what you've been working on over the past few months. One thing I really loved was your mention of seeking comfort in discomfort, because I think especially working in tech, you're always learning something new, or there's a new challenge to face. So getting comfortable with that discomfort early on can really kind of set you up for as you kind of continue through your journey and keep learning new things and pushing forward. So wishing you all the best on your job hunt, and look forward to hearing what's coming next for you.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so we are going to move into our tech journey section. And our first talk that we have there is Omotola talking about Against All Odds, My Tech Story.
Mute. Hello. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my tech story, Against All Odds. So before I start the talk, I would like to kind of talk about how I actually got into tech. So I'm Nigerian. I did most of my education, my secondary school education, back at home in Nigeria. And the way the education system works in Nigeria is that, like, in order to get into any university, you have to write an exam called JAM. So at first I was like aspiring to be a medical doctor, a gynecologist to be specific. And so when I first wrote the first JAM exam, I didn't quite meet the cutoff mark that the university wanted in order for me to get into the university for medicine. And because JAM is a yearly exam, so that means that if you don't meet the cutoff point at first, then you have to wait another year and then go back to the university to write the exam again before you're admitted if you reach the cutoff point. So what happened is that while I was like at home, you know, waiting to write these exams, I was kind of exploring other interests that I might have. And at that point, I was sort of an aspiring writer. I opened a blog and I was like, okay, let's like go into this writing thing. Let's see what's happening. And I said, you know, putting up blog posts, writing things. And from trying to write my blog posts, I started getting curious about how the blog looks. I wanted to change it. I was like, okay, I don't like how it looks. I started going into like HTML and CSS, and I wanted to kind of tweak it. And so while I was doing my research, I then bumped into W3 Schools, shout out, that's a very, very old website. And from there, I realized that there's something called coding. You can use different languages to build things. And I got immediately intrigued, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to be a medical doctor anymore. This is what I want to do, because I just felt like this was a whole new world of like building beautiful and creative things. And so once I decided that's what I wanted to do, then I then said, okay, would it be software engineering or would it be computer science? And from most of the universities that were back at home, computer science really looked very theoretical. And I thought I was a very practical person. I wanted to be more pragmatic about my learning and stuff like that. So I decided that it was software engineering. And since software engineering wasn't on offer back at home at universities, I started looking abroad. And luckily for me, there was a scholarship on the table at that time. And it was great. I was going to apply with a scholarship and come to the UK to study. But unfortunately, when I did apply for a visa to come here, I got denied that visa for reasons that was not really my fault. It was the fault of the university, but still, I still got denied the visa. And so I lost the scholarship, and then I lost the visa to come here as well. So heartbroken and all, myself and my parents, we decided that, okay, they were going to sponsor me from their pockets to come and study in the UK. And so I came to the University of Manchester to study for foundation year at first. And so during foundation year, they didn't really give me the visa to study for my undergraduate, because I didn't have the results to go directly to undergraduate. I had to start from foundation year. So I had to apply for that, and I started that at the university there. My grades were quite all right, and I got like a part scholarship to, you know, study to go into my undergraduate and pay for the first year to pay the same fees as home students do. But then being an immigrant at the time, there were a bit of restrictions, and I felt that was quite like limiting. Although that was in place, that didn't really stop me. I still had to do what I had to do in order to like progress in a career that I thought was for me. And so after foundation year, I had to still apply for another visa. This would be like the third time I'm going through the visa processes in order to like pursue this education that I wanted. And that didn't have any problems. I passed, and then I got into my undergraduate with my part scholarship, and it was great. But like I said, with the restrictions and all, so as an immigrant, you can only work like specific hours. So I couldn't do jobs that were like aligned with my career. So for example, if I wanted to freelance, for example, I couldn't do that because it will be classed as working for myself. So what I did instead was then volunteering, or doing like, or during the summer, I did jobs that were like related to my studies, so that when it came to the time that I was looking for jobs, maybe like either for placement here or like when I finish, then it would have just been a great opportunity for me to do that. But I felt that was very, very restrictive. Another thing that was quite annoying about like my status and then studying in the UK here, what I felt was restrictive as well, was as an immigrant, like when each person like signs an attendance when they come to university. But then there's something I named the yellow paper, because it was so like yellow and bright. And so as you sign in your attendance, you had to take that yellow paper as well, and then, you know, show it to the teacher that yes, you came to university that day. So that's the way they used to track us at uni. So I just felt some of those things were not really great, but I persevered because this was something that I wanted to do. And so like after that, after first year, second year, after second year, you would then think that you want to go on a placement year. So for me, this wasn't really straightforward again, because of all the visa restrictions. The visas I got was only like for 3 years that covered my undergraduate. So I had to then extend my visa again to cover my placement here. If I didn't do that, then I don't have the opportunity to go on a placement like my peers at university. So these were things that these were extra steps that I had to make in order to make sure that I'm at a better position to kind of go for the jobs after I graduate. If not, there are not a lot of companies that might want to employ me. And so I had to yet again go for another visa, which would be like the 4th time. And it was not a problem for that. I did that and I was able to extend it. Luckily enough for me, in order for me to do that before the rules changed, I would have had to go back home, apply for the visa and then come back. But with the way the situation was, then they changed the rule when I was just about to do that. I was able to then apply for the visa here. And then that was great. It was no problem. I was able to do my placement and finish it at that. And so when I finished my placement, it was a good placement. Then I came back to university for my final year. And, you know, it was great. I think first semester was amazing, but then second semester, we continued. COVID came, it did its thing. And even if I was meant to be doing my final year presentation in a hall, but I couldn't do that because of the whole, what happened with the COVID, everyone had to stay at home, but it was still great. I was able to present and I feel like I did a good job presenting to my lecturers over Microsoft Teams, and I finished with that. There's no graduation yet, but like hopefully next year sometime there will be one. But I'm done with uni now, which is great. But I would say like looking back now with all the hurdles that I had to like pass in order to like get to the points that I am at now, even before finishing this graduate job, I think I read somewhere that when graduates finish from university, Black people compared to their white counterparts sometimes are not able to get these jobs. But then if you're looking at that statistics, then if you think about immigrants, you think that that is like a very, very low shot for them to like get a job after they finish. So like I looked at this and I thought to myself that against all these odds or against all the struggles, I needed to really like push myself to, you know, get what I wanted. And so thankfully enough, I was able to get a job after I finished uni. Thankfully I'm going to be starting that in September. And looking back at all the things I had to go through in order to like get to this point, I will really say that like if for anything that anyone is wanting to start or go into, I think the why for me is like very important. If you have like a strong why as to why you feel like this path is really good for you, then I think this is something that should kind of help you throughout your journey to what you've picked to do. And I also appreciate the fact that I spent some time thinking about what I wanted to do. I can't imagine having to be a medical doctor. I do not think I would have been a good medical doctor. So I'm really appreciative of that time that I spent at home thinking or changing my path to doing what I'm doing now. So I think I would like to conclude this by saying that have a strong why, because there's going to be like 1,001 hurdles, but you just really have to keep on going if it's something that you want to do. And the other thing about like knowing exactly or not rushing into a decision and knowing exactly what you want is very, very paramount. So thank you. And that is my tech journey.
Thank you so much for sharing. It was really great to hear your story. And I was really inspired by your determination and how you kind of pushed through and gotten to the point where now you've got a new role coming up. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
The journey through to the next stage.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. So we have, next up, we have Sandra, who'll be talking about from user A-level to being a master's student.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hi, so my name is Sandra. I am a master's student. I study data science and analytics at the moment. So I'm just going to talk to you guys about how I literally went from getting user A-levels to now being a master's student. So just a bit of content, like background about myself. So I obviously did GCSEs. At the time, my parents wanted me to be like a nurse or a doctor or be in healthcare. And I definitely knew that that wasn't something I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't want to do it. As much as I love helping people and everything, I definitely knew that that wasn't where my ground was. During GCSEs and trying to pick if I wanted to do A-levels and BTECs at sixth form, my teacher actually told me that I should do a BTEC business, and I definitely knew I didn't want to do that either. I wanted to challenge myself. I didn't think that I could just do coursework. I felt like I can do way more than what they were trying to put me to do as well. So I literally went against their advice and I went to college. And funny enough, I found a college that would take me to do A-levels. And I did maths, IT and business studies at A-levels. So I did that for a year, and obviously it was a time when we literally did AS and then A-levels. So you could like go to college and you can get like an AS grade, and then that's great. So when I did get to my AS, I pretty much opened up my paper and I literally, all I got was U's. My maths was U's, my IT was a U, my business studies was U's, down to the exams, down to the coursework, and I just felt very, very, very defeated. I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore. Like, I definitely knew I couldn't go back to my parents with such grades as well. So that kind of went with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So even though I failed, I thought to myself, okay, cool, let me take a BTEC. But I didn't want to take a business BTEC. So I decided to take applied science at college. So that actually resulted in me doing 3 years at college. But I definitely knew that I still wanted to do IT, be in the tech industry. So alongside doing my applied science BTEC, I decided to start to learn how to code. So that's what I literally did. And I was like, yeah, great, I'm going to go off and do a software engineering degree. And I literally applied and I was like, yeah, nothing's going to stop me. This is my story. Take me, leave me, but I'm still going to be in this industry regardless of what I have done anyway. So I did get into uni and I got in and I did software engineering at university at Bournemouth. And from there, it was great. Like, I enjoyed my first year of uni as you do, as usual. And when I went on results day for my first year of undergrad, I actually failed the year. So I was kind of defeated again. I was like, great. So not only did I spend 3 years at college, I now have like failed my first year of uni, and like, I'm like, great, amazing. Like, what am I going to do? So I thought to myself, you know what? I decided to make this commitment. I'm going to continue. And I literally retook the whole entire year. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to retake the year. This is my industry. Like, I'm claiming tech as my industry, and I'm going to thrive in it regardless. So continued on. And then last year, I actually graduated from Bournemouth with a 2-2. And I was happy with that. I was so amazed. And I was like, yes, like, I've actually finished my degree. Like, I was so happy. And I was like, oh, okay, 2-2. So I actually did get into work. I actually started being a web developer. So I'm actually a freelance web developer. So I was just like, yeah, like, I'm going to start working. But then part of me was like, I still want to continue education. Like, if I can complete sixth form, I can complete a degree, like, let's go for the masters. So I literally talked to my boss and I was like, yeah, I think I want to do my masters. Like, are you willing to like back me on it? And he was like, yeah, great, amazing, like, go for it. And this is where I am now. So like, now I'm doing my masters in data science and analytics. As much as I did software and stuff like that, I realized that there's something about data as well. So I decided to take my masters in it, so like I can get the best of both worlds in that sense. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And alongside that, I do coding. I teach kids how to code, and I'm just doing my masters. So yeah, that is me, and thank you for listening.
Great, thanks so much for sharing your story. It's really great to hear how you've kind of navigated the years of your studies, and that you're now kind of teaching others and younger people and encouraging them on their journeys as well. So thank you for sharing. Okay, so we have Tessy, who will be talking about Black Unicorn, occupying spaces against the odds.
Hello, everyone. If you just bear with me, I'm going to put my slides on. Thank you. Okay, hopefully. Yeah, can we all see that?
Not yet.
Yeah. Oh, because I forgot one last bit I have to do. Sorry about that. Which is share the screen.
I always do that.
And every single time I do this at school, I do the same thing.
Yeah, we can see your page.
You can see it now. Brilliant. Okay, so I will present that again.
Okay.
And now.
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. So I feel so honored because everyone that's spoken on this platform, I see a little bit of me in every single person. So I'm really glad that I'm getting this opportunity to speak. My name is Tessy. I'm head of computer science at a secondary school. I also run an organization called Educating Africa, which sends disadvantaged Afro-Caribbean girls especially to school. I enjoy programming. I think of myself as the ultimate geek. I love Python, I love Kotlin, I love Android Studio. I think of nothing better. I don't even want to watch Netflix. That's all I do all day. I'm that boring. And I enjoy uplifting women like myself. I enjoy uplifting Black communities. And I just wanted to share my mantra, which is 2 roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's lines of a poem by Robert Frost, and it's because my entire journey up to this point and going forward has been about asking why not. So if there was an easier route and a very dangerous looking path, I always took the wrong path. To some people, but to me, I've enjoyed choosing that path. I grew up in London in a proper traditional Catholic Nigerian household. So I tell people in all honesty, then I just grew up in Nigeria. And my dad straight away, he had chosen my destiny. He's like, no dreaming, focus on your books, you be a doctor, you get married. Easy, right? I don't get any beats. But what did I do? I put my heads in the clouds and I have the ass whooping to show for it. And I started teaching myself how to code HTML in Notepad. So before there was YouTube, before there was Udemy, before there was W3S schools, think about it, how old I must be then. So just there, teaching myself how to code. I built a whole website by myself. I produced my own tracks on GarageBand and recorded my album. I was so excited. I'm going to show my mom and dad. And they were just like, you see Bill Gates, he invented computer. You're here making music. Invent computer and then you'll be special. So I thought maybe they thought they were dissuading me, but it just made me more intent on becoming a computer scientist. And so this slide kind of represents my journey to that point. So I've had to do all these jobs and that creates the unique experience for me. I've worked at McDonald's. I've tried to be an Afrobeats pop star. That's some of my claim to fame sometimes. And I think people are always looking at Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates as they're kind of like idols. But what about the things that you go through that create the unique experiences that then create the success that's important to you? So I think those are so important. There isn't just one journey to success. There are a myriad of ways that you can get there. And I think that's why I'm giving this talk today. I'd like us all to be visible. There was a Black woman in a hijab. There was a woman from abroad. And we need to be visible to each other and then be visible to Black girls so they can see that it is possible no matter what you're interested in. If you're interested in doing every single TikTok dance or in doing makeup tutorials, you can also innovate, make a difference in the world, in the future that you want to live in. And so some of my takeaways then I'm hoping today, first one is self-efficacy. I feel like we have to be our own cheerleaders. We have to be resilient. We really have to believe in ourselves. At 19, I was about to become a single mom. I got pregnant. I showed my dad, then yes, I'm a very stupid girl. The whole world had written me off. But then I was like, no, I can do this. I can still keep pushing forward. I have a lot to offer. And I struggled along the way. It's not like I got there in a heartbeat. I suffered from imposter syndrome. So when I got to perform in front of 50,000 people in the end, I was like, no, I'm not good enough. And I quit music. But I still had to keep going regardless. And today I have a teenage daughter that the first thing she does is show everybody my music video while I'm just covering my face like, no, why are you doing this? Another thing is about patience as well. I feel like when we start learning to program, even when I picked up Kotlin the other day during the pandemic, I wanted to do it overnight. I'm good at Python, right? I'm good at Java, so I should know it instantly. But like being at the gym with your form, the first times is going to be hard, but as you progress, you're going to get better. You keep consistent and you celebrate every little milestone. You kind of congratulate yourself for what you have achieved, okay? And that's why I love being in music, because sometimes I'll speak to an artist I used to know and they'll be like, 10 years later, they're still making music. They're in it for a lifetime. They're not just in it as a fad. And then I think lifetime of learning is really important. That's why I like the growth mindset. I'm always thinking about what can I learn next? And because I'm self-taught, well, I'm home educated as well, I guess it comes a bit easy to me, but I say to my students, whatever you see someone else doing, why don't you learn that too? And then you find your own space as well. And my mentor, when I was practicing teachers training, he used to say, you're like a sponge, because I give you feedback, your face looks weird, but the next day you've already enacted that feedback. So I think you've got to keep learning all the time. Lastly, as well, I'm hoping that people become unicorns. I know it's scary to get into leadership. It's scary because I've met a lot of teachers along the way, Black women, Black men, Asian, and I say to them, well, why aren't you a head of department? Why aren't you in the SLT? Why aren't you a head teacher? And they're like, well, when I get there, I don't think I'll be authentic to myself. But I think it's about being in that room with all those middle-aged white men regardless. When I went to pitch my first tech app in San Francisco, they were like, what? Nigerians have apps? And I was just like, that's actually rude. But I was there no matter how scary it was. So we've just got to be unicorns regardless. And lastly, have fun all the time. If you're not having fun, I feel like you shouldn't be doing it. People said holidays. On Saturday, I'm off to Malaga. I'm always somewhere, Mauritius, Cancun, because I love holidays. You might like something else. Make sure you're having fun, because if COVID has taught us anything, it's that the world can come to a standstill without you even knowing, you know? So let's just keep having fun no matter what. These are some of the tools I found really interesting as I build startups, as I teach kids how to code. I find that these have helped a lot of people and helped myself. I'd love to connect with all of you. I feel really grateful that finally, after all these years, there are communities like this that I can actually reach into and meet people like myself. I know I went quite fast. I prefer talking to 300 kids than a few adults, but thank you for having me on this platform. And I hope to be involved in the community overall. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Tessy. That was really inspiring. And the bit that I really, really loved out of all of that was in there was about being visible to each other. There were a lot of great messages. It was really powerful, and I really appreciated that reminder. Thank you. Okay, so we have our last talk. Last but not least, we have Naomi, who will be talking about being a geography graduate working in tech.
Hi, everyone. Just one moment. I'm just going to share my screen. So please let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So hi, I am Naomi Robinson, and I will be talking about my tech journey being a geography graduate. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Charlene, Siobhan, the whole team for allowing me to speak. And I'm really looking forward to being honest and open about what I've learned in my first year in the IT industry, and also some challenges and insights. So moving to my journey, a bit about myself and where my tech journey actually started. So I would say the first day or the first year would be in 2018. So this is when I graduated from University of Manchester in human geography. And honestly, I would say that before graduation, I never considered a career in technology. And this is for a number of reasons. I say quite similar to what Tessy touched upon in terms of visibility. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of Black women or women that looked like me in IT or tech, so I never considered it. And that just linked into a lack of knowledge about what roles were available and just not seeing it as a viable option at all. So post-graduation, in the next couple of months between mid-2018 to the end of 2019, I did a number of contracting and internships, but the three that really stood out for me and linked to where I am today is an internship that I did at Upreach organization. And Upreach is a social mobility charity that pushes young people from different socioeconomic backgrounds into kind of exclusive careers and essentially the corporate industry. So that was I would call this a passion internship, because I was really interested to see the intersections that link to barriers of entry. So I really enjoyed that. I also did an internship at the New York Times. So I worked with the consumer insights team on a consultancy project, looking at how mainly British young people engage with the New York Times and how that translates into, you know, buying a subscription on an annual basis. So I really enjoyed that as well. And lastly, I would say one of the key moments that actually pushed me into consider a career in IT was when I finished my level 1 front end course with Code First for Girls. And if I'm being honest, I just did this course because during this time I was working, but I had some free time and I had a lot of chatter about coding and it was a good skill to have. So I was like, you know what? Let me do this course. And once I finished it, I just felt that I had insight and knowledge into the IT industry. And even though I decided at that point that I didn't want to necessarily go into technical roles such as developer, I knew that I wanted to join and work in the IT sector and more specifically consulting. So that led to the start of 2019, where I started Capgemini on the Business and Technology Graduate Scheme, where I am currently. And moving on to 2020, more present day, I have upskilled outside of my 9-to-5 by completing a UX design course with an initiative called UX Homework Club. And I'm also redesigning a grassroots organization's website. So that has been a really interesting experience. So what I really wanted to show about my very short journey over a year and a half is that it's been very unconventional. And there's been so many key pivotal moments I didn't realize until looking back has pushed me into the IT industry and my current role at Capgemini. I forgot to mention that I'm coming up to my first year on the graduate scheme. So moving on to what I have learned. So I've learned a lot during my first year in the IT industry, especially as someone coming from a non-technical background. So that would be embracing your difference, embrace your difference. Secondly, finding your link. And thirdly, intentional learning. So firstly, what I mean by embracing your difference. So when I actually started Capgemini, I vividly remember the induction day and there was about 60 of us. And I was one of the only 2 people from a humanities background. And immediately I thought that this would be a disadvantage because I thought that I would approach team exercises differently. I just had a lot of negative thoughts that I would always have to play catch up. But I soon realized that this wasn't the case. If anything, coming from a geographical background actually played to my advantage. And also when I left the induction and actually was placed on my first project, I realized that managers and colleagues actually embraced that geographical lens that I had. And also I just think that, you know, through conversations, a lot of progressive companies are attracting people that think differently. So I normally think that, you know, if you're a manager and you have a problem, you want people that come from different backgrounds to really provide that insight. So I would definitely say whether you're like me and your difference is the academic difference, not coming from a STEM background, definitely embrace that. And it's not a disadvantage, and actually use that in terms of how you approach situations at work. So secondly, finding your link. So I think that this is really important. I feel like a lot of the presenters today talked on finding your why and purpose and being fulfilled at work. And for me, you're probably thinking, how am I linking a geography degree with technology? So the way that I did that is that I really questioned myself, what is it that I loved about human geography? And for me, that was definitely looking at how people interacted with society and how this was structured around geographical processes. And then I tried to link that with tech. So what interests me about tech? And that is how customers or consumers interact with products, whether that's a front end interface or whether that's an app. And the reason why I think this is important, especially for someone who is on a graduate scheme where you have to be very proactive about being a self-starter and solidifying your career, is that you have to find your why. And I just feel that in terms of it, it generates perseverance as well, because even if you're not on a project or somewhere where you don't really enjoy, you can understand the why and just cultivate that vision, really. So finally, the last learning that I found really useful was intentional learning. And what I meant by this is, you know, a lot of people today talked about upskilling and just being really intentional about where you're putting your time and your energy, especially with extra qualifications and conversations as well, just to make sure that's aligned with your professional vision. And for me, I think that in my first couple of months when I was still finding that link with geography and tech, when I didn't really know that link, I was having a lot of conversations with people at work, outside of work, and if I'm honest, I was really wanting someone to tell me what I should be doing in my career, and we honestly can't rely on that. And I'd have to say that a lot of difficult conversation and training led me to, you know, formulate where I want to be. And also conversations as well, like even, you know, being here and talking and networking, there's so many opportunities, but I would always say be prepared. That's one thing I've learned when I'm reaching out to someone for advice or even mentoring. It's always good to have your questions ready or what you want from that conversation. So I would say those have been, you know, my 3 key learnings about my first year in tech. And I just want to encourage anyone that if you're considering joining the tech industry, or if you are in the tech industry from a non-technical or STEM background, that this is never a disadvantage. And yeah, thank you for listening. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll drop my link. And yeah, take care.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It was really great to hear your journey. And I loved that point that you made, that your background in geography wasn't a disadvantage. It actually turned around and became a strength. And I think it's a great reminder that it's never too late to get into the tech industry if that's something you're interested in doing. And you don't have to leave behind the things that you've done before when you move into tech. Find ways to bring those interests, those experiences that you've had into what you're doing in technology, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Siobhan.
You're welcome. Thank you so much to all of our speakers this evening. Every single one of you was amazing, and I really got a lot out of hearing all of your different stories and all of the knowledge and learning that you shared. So I'm definitely feeling really inspired and really renewed, just seeing amazing women like ourselves that are, you know, smashing it in their respective areas. So it was really great to be part of tonight. We've finished up a little bit early. So we have time for 2 questions. We've got one that came in from YouTube, so I will ask that one. But if there are any burning questions that people want to put into the chat, we'll pick one out of those and we'll ask those of the panel, or if someone specific, if there's a specific question. So the question that we had that came in on YouTube was to Temi, saying, do you know of any platforms or places where someone can get started with the 100 days of code?
In terms of platforms, I would just say, I know for me, what I did was, so I saw a lot of people on Twitter involved in the challenge, and I knew that a lot of them were following courses. So I would say some really good places to kind of follow courses if you want a structure would be Free Code Camp, Udemy, and there's also a lot of good ones on YouTube. So I know Traversy Media and also Programming with Mosh has quite a lot of good courses. I can link them in the chat as well if that would be helpful to that person.
Yeah, that'd be great. And thanks. There was a lot of resources there, so thanks for sharing that.
No worries.
I will give a minute or two just in case anyone's writing a question into our chat window.
Whilst we're waiting, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for amazing talks. It's been really, really good to listen to you all this evening. I've just been sat here in the background today with Siobhan doing everything, and I have just been absolutely inspired constantly. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Siobhan, for hosting tonight. You were fantastic. And yeah, thank you to everyone for taking part. And I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you if we're not already connected, so that we can do really amazing things for the community. So awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, if I could just do one last thing before we...
Tessy, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if anyone's in Birmingham and likes to come, oh great, Charlene, I'll see you there then. Bye everyone else. If you like.
I was going to say, we're running a boot camp in Birmingham.
Oh, okay.
And we need people to support with supporting the learners and that sort of thing. So it'd be definitely good to have a chat. I have sent you a message already on LinkedIn just to be like, by the way, we're connected, talk to me.
Okay, brilliant. So anyone else in Birmingham, we're nice like that. If you want to connect with me, I love coding. That's the only thing I'm going to talk about, coding, so I'll be boring. Well, traveling as well. But if you'd like to connect, please, and you're in Birmingham. Thank you.
And just before we wrap up, if I could invite our speakers, if we could have everyone together just quickly to say a quick bye, if you don't mind putting your cameras on.
Hello, can you see me?
Yeah.
God, I didn't think about what I look like.
A picture or something.
I do my hair today.
That's why I'm wearing a hat.
I need to get one.
I like to smile.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Go. Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that dialed in for this evening's session. We will be sharing it on YouTube as well, so keep an eye out for the link to that when that's ready.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evenings.
Have a great evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.